1830 hours, the Red Sea, 50 miles northwest of Hodeidah. The sun is bleeding out over the Yemeni coast, painting the water in orange and copper. 5 merchant hulls are moving northeast in convoy formation, spaced roughly half a mile apart. One Arleigh Burke-class destroyer runs escort on their port quarter. And somewhere, that darkening sky above them, something is circling. It is not a drone. It is not a jet. It is a SAKR-358 loitering cruise missile, and it has been orbiting above this convoy for nearly 4 minutes. Throttled back, patient, scanning. The crew of the escort destroyer has not seen it. Their radar has not found it, and the SAKR-358 is in no hurry, because it was designed specifically to exploit that window of blindness. Before we go any further, this is a hypothetical scenario built from real, documented capabilities for education and analysis. The systems are real, the tactics are real. The engagement is reconstructed to teach you how the kill chain actually works. Here is what this episode is really about. A missile that learned to hide by being slow, and a sensor network that learned to find it by thinking big. Stay with me, because the way this ends tells you something fundamental about modern naval warfare that most people get completely wrong. Let's set the board. The convoy is commercial shipping, 5 hulls, bulk cargo and fuel, transiting the southern Red Sea toward the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The escort is a single Arleigh Burke destroyer, running the standard package. AN/SY-6 air search radar active, standard missile inventory loaded in the Mark 41 vertical launch cells forward and aft, phalanx size on standby. One ship covering 5 hulls across a radar horizon of roughly 20 miles. That number, 20 miles, is the first thing you need to hold in your head, not a capability limit, a geometry limit. Here is the physics. Radar waves travel in straight lines. The Earth curves. Past roughly 20 miles of sea level surface, the curvature of the planet drops your radar horizon below line of sight. Anything flying low enough or slow enough to read as background noise can sit just at the edge of that window, and the ship's own sensors will never paint it cleanly. This is not a flaw the Arleigh Burke's designers missed. It is the geometry of a round planet, and the Houthis built the SAKR-358's flight profile specifically around it. The SAKR-358 is a loitering cruise missile. Think of it as the mid-tier cousin of the Shahed 136, but purpose-built to loiter, not sprint. It climbs to altitude after launch, then throttles back its engine to minimum power, dropping its radar cross-section, reducing its acoustic signature, and bleeding off the Doppler shift that would flag it as a fast mover on a ship's radar. At altitude, at low speed, on a circular orbit, it looks to a ship's radar like clutter, like a bird, like sea spray bouncing off a wave crest at range, like noise. The radar operator on the destroyer sees a smear at the edge of his display. Not a track, not a missile, a smear, and the SAKR-358 orbits. What's most surprising about this tactic isn't the missile itself. It's the patience built into the doctrine. The SAKR-358 is designed to outlast a single ship's radar attention span. In a high-clutter electromagnetic environment at dusk, with the sun's angle creating thermal ducting effects over the water, a human operator looking at a dozen ambiguous contacts cannot stare at one smear for 6 straight minutes without his attention drifting. The missile exploits cognitive load as much as it exploits geometry. 4 minutes into the loiter, the SAKR-358 has not yet selected a target. It is still scanning. The doctrine is specific. Find the largest hull. Confirm it is not the warship. Dive. The 5 merchant vessels represent roughly $2 billion in cargo and infrastructure. One hit on a fuel tanker at dusk in the Red Sea corridor triggers insurance rate spikes, rerouting, supply chain disruption. The cost of the SAKR-358 to manufacture and launch, estimated at around $100,000. $100,000 against a potential $2 billion disruption. That is the entire logic of the Houthi naval campaign distilled into one airframe. The destroyer's crew is not idle. They are tracking. They have multiple contacts in the air. Commercial aircraft at altitude, radar returns from the convoy ships themselves. The usual electromagnetic noise of a busy maritime corridor. The smear at the edge of coverage keeps appearing, disappearing, reappearing. Is it a threat? Is it clutter? The ship's combat system is flagging it as low confidence. Not enough information to fire. Not enough certainty to expend a $4 million SM-6. That is the problem the kill chain was built to solve. And it almost didn't get solved in time. 6 minutes into the loiter, the SAKR-358 begins its terminal acquisition sequence. The targeting seeker is active. It is choosing a hull. The escort destroyer is still 23 miles away, still painting that smear as low confidence. The math says the Houthis win this one, except for one aircraft nobody on that missile's guidance system can account for. 200 miles to the northwest, at 30,000 feet, an E-2D Hawkeye is running its orbit. This is a propeller-driven aircraft that looks, on paper, like it belongs in a different era. Twin turboprops, a rotating radar dish mounted above the fuselage, a crew of 5. Not fast, not stealthy, not particularly dramatic to look at. But the ANAN-PAPI-9 radar system inside that disc is one of the most capable airborne early warning sensors in any military inventory on the planet, and it has been tracking the SAKR-358 since the missile was 2 minutes off the launch rail. Here is the mechanism that changes everything, and this is what I want you to really understand. The E-2D is not limited by the Earth's curvature the way a ship is. At 30,000 feet, its radar horizon extends hundreds of miles. It can see over the horizon from the convoy's perspective. It can paint targets that no ship in the battle group can see with its own sensors. And it can generate what the Navy calls a fire quality track, a position, velocity, altitude, and course calculation precise enough to cue a weapon system to launch without the shooter ever seeing the target directly. Think of it this way. You are standing in a valley trying to hit a target on the other side of a hill. You cannot see the target, but your spotter is standing on top of the hill with a laser rangefinder, feeding you coordinates in real time. You aim at coordinates, not at something you can see. The E-2D is the spotter, the Arleigh Burke is you, the SM-6 is the round. The E-2D passes its track over Link 16, the encrypted data network that ties together every ship, aircraft, and sensor node in the battle group into one shared picture. The track arrives in the Arleigh Burke's Aegis combat system not as a suggestion, not as an advisory, as a targeting solution. Aegis processes it. The fire control system calculates the intercept geometry. At 6 minutes and 40 seconds into the Sakr-358's loiter, the Arleigh Burke launches. The ship fires at a target it cannot see. Put yourself in the destroyer's combat information center for a second. Your own radar has not confirmed the threat. Your display shows a low confidence contact at the edge of coverage, but the Aegis system is telling you the E-2D has a fire quality lock. Link 16 is feeding you the track, and the weapons release authorization has come down. You are about to expend a $4 million missile based entirely on someone else's eyes. That is not a failure of your system. That is your system working exactly as designed. And it works because the kill chain was engineered specifically for this scenario. Because the people who built Aegis understood that a ship's own radar horizon would always be its tactical ceiling, and they built architecture to break through that ceiling using off-board sensors. Here is the take that will probably draw some pushback. The Arleigh Burke in this scenario is not the primary weapon. It is the launcher, the E-2D Hawkeye, a 50-year-old propeller aircraft that most defense commentary ignores in favor of the destroyer and the missile, is the weapon. Remove the E-2D from this equation and the Sakr-358 reaches the convoy. The $4 million SM-6 is just the kinetic end of a chain that starts 200 miles away at 30,000 feet above the Red Sea. The SM-6 clears the forward VLS cells in a column of white smoke and immediately goes active on the off-board track. The missile does not need to acquire the SAKR-358 on its own seeker immediately. It is flying on coordinates fed from the E-2D through the Aegis system, and it will switch to active terminal homing only in the final seconds of intercept. This is the semi-active, active hybrid guidance mode that makes the SM-6 genuinely different from earlier standard missiles. It can ride a data link to the intercept point and then go hunting on its own. Here's something about the SM-6 that almost nobody mentions. In its terminal phase, the seeker can home on the target independently even if the data link goes down. The missile was built assuming contested electromagnetic environments, jamming, spoofing, link degradation. The Houthis cannot break the shot by burning the data link. Once the SM-6 is airborne and past its mid-course phase, it will find the target with or without the E-2D holding the connection. The designers anticipated the countermeasure and closed the loop before it could be exploited. The SAKR-358 is at 8,300 feet. Beginning its terminal dive, Seeker locked on the largest hull in the convoy formation when the SM-6's active radar comes up in its face. What happens next takes under 4 seconds. The SM-6's proximity fuse detonates the warhead at optimum burst range. The SAKR-358 does not reach the water. It does not reach the ship. It comes apart in the air over the Red Sea, roughly 11 miles from the nearest merchant vessel, gone in 4 seconds. The convoy does not break formation. The 5 hulls maintain course and speed. The debris field from the SAKR-358 hits the water. The E-2D logs the engagement data, track history, launch point estimation, terminal profile, and that information goes into the intelligence picture. But the engagement is not over. Not because there is a second wave, because the data trail left by the SAKR-358 tells a story that matters more than the missile itself. Here is what strikes me about this engagement, and what it tells us about the current state of the Red Sea campaign. The Houthis got the geometry right. The SAKR-358's loiter profile was correctly designed to exploit the destroyer's 20-mile radar horizon. The low-speed, high-altitude orbit was correctly executed to create radar ambiguity. On the ship's own display, the tactic was working. The smear was holding, the confidence level was low, the clock was running. Against a ship operating without offboard queuing, this missile profile probably works. The E-2D was not a lucky factor, it was a systemic factor. The battle group architecture assumes the E-2D is present. The SM-6 was designed around the assumption that offboard queuing would be available. The kill chain was built specifically because naval planners understood that individual ship radar horizons are insufficient against exactly this class of threat. The Houthis designed a weapon to beat a ship. The US Navy designed a network to beat that weapon. One thing that didn't sit right during this analysis: the SAKR-358's loiter window of roughly 6 minutes was enough. If that track had degraded 30 seconds earlier, if the E-2D had been at a different orbit point, if Link 16 had stuttered for 8 seconds, the intercept geometry narrows dangerously. The kill chain works. It worked here, but it works at the margins of the timeline, and that margin is thinner than the press releases suggest. Do you think a single E-2D orbiting 200 miles out is enough coverage for the full Red Sea corridor? Or is that sensor dependency itself vulnerability the Houthis will eventually try to close? Tell us in the comments. We read everyone. Back in the CC, the Aegis system has already cleared the engagement from the active threat queue. The fire control solution has been archived. The vertical launch count has decremented by 1. And the E-2D is already back on its orbit track, its radar disk still rotating, still painting the airspace from 30,000 feet over the Red Sea. Here is what the Houthis now know from this engagement. The intercept happened at 11 miles from the convoy. The SAKR-358 was painting its target at the start of terminal dive. The time between E-2D track acquisition and SM-6 impact was under 90 seconds. That timeline will go into their planning cycle. They will ask what they need to change. Faster terminal dive, lower loiter altitude, electronic countermeasures, simultaneous multi-axis launch to saturate the kill chain. The answer to every one of those adaptations already exists in the battle group's doctrine. The kill chain architecture was designed to beat one SAKR-358. It was designed to beat the doctrine that produces the SAKR-358. The network sees the launch, cues the intercept, logs the profile, and feeds the intelligence back into the loop. The missile is gone. The profile has been recorded. The next one will not be a surprise in the same way. We dug through the publicly available engagement data from Red Sea intercepts across the 2024 to 2026 period, and one pattern keeps appearing. The Houthi adaptation cycle runs between 3 and 6 weeks. They modify a profile, the battle group sees it, adjusts, intercepts. Then they modify again. It is an iterative loop. What's worth noting is that the E-2D and Link 16 are on the faster side of that cycle. The network updates faster than the missile can adapt. That is not an accident of technology. It is a deliberate architectural choice. The Convoy clears the most dangerous segment of the corridor by 2100 hours. The E-2D completes its orbit cycle and hands off coverage to a second aircraft. The Arleigh Burke replenishes its fire solution database and maintains escort formation. And somewhere on the Yemeni coast, the launch team is filing their after-action report. The SAKR-358 made it to terminal acquisition. It began its dive. It was intercepted before impact. For the Houthis, that is actually useful data, not a defeat, an experiment. They launched a $100,000 weapon, got it into the kill zone, got terminal seeker lock, and lost it in the last 4 seconds. They now know the SM-6 intercept altitude. They know the approximate timeline. They know the off-board queuing is faster than they had modeled. Comment yes if you think that asymmetric iteration, cheap missiles, collect data on every intercept, adapt is ultimately a problem the kill chain architecture cannot solve at scale. Before we go, there is one detail about the SM-6 that almost nobody in mainstream defense coverage talks about. and it reframes this entire engagement. The SM-6 was not designed primarily as a missile defense weapon. It was designed as an anti-ship missile. The same round that just took down the SAKR-358 can be fired at a surface target over the horizon, using the same off-board queuing architecture. The E-2D that queued the intercept tonight could just as easily queue an offensive SM-6 strike against a ship at 130 miles range, beyond the horizon, beyond the target's own radar coverage, beyond any reasonable defensive reaction time. The weapon that defended the convoy is the same weapon that could threaten any surface force in the Red Sea, operating without equivalent sensor. Coverage, that is not a footnote, that is the doctrine. The E-2D is not a support aircraft. It is the center of a kill web that works in both directions. And the Arleigh Burke is one of its arms. The plane that sees, not the ship that shoots, is the real weapon. If this is the kind of breakdown you want to see more of, how the systems actually work, not just that they worked, subscribe and hit the bell, and tell us in the comments, what engagement do you want us to break down next? The kill chain is the same across every theater. The geometry changes. That is where it gets interesting.